That would make Gene Roddenberry turn in his grave.
Something remarkable just happened in the Star Trek universe, and not on screen. For the first time in the franchise's nearly 60-year history, there are no Star Trek productions currently filming anywhere on the planet. No starships being built on a soundstage. No cadets suiting up for early morning shoots. No cameras rolling on Vulcan sets or Federation corridors. The iconic sets at Pinewood Studios, Toronto, where Star Trek, Starfleet Academy, and Strange New Worlds brought the future to life, have been torn down. The wood, the wire, the flashing panels, all of it, gone. And with them, an era of Star Trek television that the original cast has quietly, and not so quietly, watched unravel for years. Today, we're talking about the moment the franchise hit rock bottom, why the legends who built Star Trek are furious about what it has become, and what needs to happen before Gene Roddenberry's dream can live again. Let's start with the facts, because the facts alone are staggering enough without any embellishment. Star Trek, Starfleet Academy premiered on Paramount Plus in January 2026. It was supposed to be the franchise's bridge to a younger generation, a coming-of-age story set in the 32nd century, following a fresh class of Starfleet cadets through their trials, triumphs, and personal growth at a reopened academy. On paper, it had everything going for it. A talented cast. A streaming home hungry for hits. The full weight of the Star Trek brand behind it. And critically, the show earned a respectable 87% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with reviewers calling it a charming, youthful addition to the Trek canon. So by every critical measure, Starfleet Academy should have had a fighting chance. But the numbers told a completely different story. Across all 10 episodes of its first season, Starfleet Academy failed, not once, not twice, but every single week, to crack Nielsen's top 10 streaming viewership charts. That is a brutal metric. We're not talking about underperforming slightly or falling just outside the list on a competitive week. We're talking about a total, consistent absence from the conversation that casual streaming audiences were actually having. The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes settled at a dismal 51%, a gap of 36 points between what critics thought and what regular viewers felt. Paramount had already greenlit a second season before the first even aired, and that second season was filmed and wrapped by late February 2026. Then, less than 2 weeks after the Season 1 finale hit screens, the axe came down. Starfleet Academy was cancelled. The second season will air as a farewell, and then it's over. And here is the part that should genuinely alarm every person who calls themselves a Star Trek fan. With Starfleet Academy gone and Strange New Worlds already filming its 5th and final season before this cancellation even happened, there is now nothing in active development. No greenlit series. No announced production. For the first time in nearly a decade, Star Trek on television is effectively in a coma. CBS Studios and Paramount released a careful corporate statement praising the ambition, passion, and creativity of the Starfleet Academy team, the kind of gracious language that studio executives deploy when they want to close a chapter without assigning blame. Executive producers Alex Kurtzman and Noga Landau released their own open letter, invoking Roddenberry's name and his vision of humanity's better future, of learning to take delight in differences rather than fear them. It was a thoughtful letter. But it could not mask the reality that the franchise is now at a crossroads unlike any it has faced before. Now, where does the original cast fit into all of this? William Shatner, Captain Kirk himself, now 93 years old, has never been shy about speaking his mind on matters that touch the franchise he helped make immortal. George Takei, who brought Hikaru Sulu to life and has spent decades as one of Hollywood's most outspoken civil rights advocates, has long had opinions about the direction of the stories he sees told in his name. Walter Koenig, who played the eternally enthusiastic Pavel Chekhov, has similarly never disappeared quietly into the background when Star Trek's integrity was at stake. These are not passive men. They did not build something legendary across 6 decades only to watch from the sidelines in comfortable silence. Here is what we know is true about how the original series cast relates to modern Trek. They are deeply protective of what Star Trek was always meant to be. Not a soapbox, not a lecture, but a mirror. Roddenberry's original vision used science fiction as allegory. It wrapped big, uncomfortable ideas about race, war, identity, and humanity inside adventure stories that were genuinely thrilling to watch. The original series put a black woman, an Asian man, and a Russian on the bridge of a starship in 1966, at the height of the civil rights movement and the Cold War, and it did so without ever stopping to congratulate itself. The diversity was there. It was visible and it was meaningful. But it never overshadowed the story. It was the story. That distinction matters enormously, and it is at the heart of what longtime fans, including many of the original cast, have found lacking in recent iterations of the franchise. The criticism of Starfleet Academy from the broader Trek fanbase wasn't simply about politics. It was about execution. It was about whether the characters felt like fully realized human beings with complex inner lives, or whether they felt like representatives of categories assembled to check demographic boxes. There is a version of diverse, progressive storytelling that is also riveting television. The original Star Trek proved that over 50 years ago. The anger directed at modern Trek is, at its core, the frustration of fans who believe that the franchise stopped trusting its own legacy, stopped believing that good stories with thoughtful characters could carry the weight of the ideas the show has always wanted to explore. What makes the current moment so significant is that the cancellation of Starfleet Academy didn't happen in isolation. It is the latest chapter in a long pattern of declining Star Trek television. Discovery ran 5 seasons and ended. Picard concluded after 3. Lower Decks was cancelled. Prodigy found a second life on Netflix after Paramount dropped it, but its theatrical home was gone. Strange New Worlds, widely regarded as the best of the modern era for its genuine love of episodic, optimistic storytelling, is winding down. And Alex Kurtzman, the architect of this entire modern era of Star Trek television, has a contract reportedly expiring at the end of 2026. The question of who guides Star Trek next, and what vision they bring to it, is now the single most important question in the franchise's future. Paramount itself is a different company than it was even 2 years ago. Skydance Media acquired Paramount Global in 2025, bringing new leadership and new priorities to the corporate parent of the Star Trek IP. Brian Robbins, who has served as Paramount Global CEO, now operates within that changed landscape. The future of Star Trek will be shaped by decisions made in that executive suite, decisions about who runs the creative side, what kind of stories get greenlit, and whether the lessons of the Starfleet Academy era are genuinely absorbed or simply papered over with new marketing language. And this is precisely why the voices of the original cast matter so much right now. Not because elderly actors should be making streaming decisions in corporate boardrooms, but because they represent something that no algorithm, no focus group, and no studio memo can manufacture. The authentic soul of what Star Trek was created to be. William Shatner lived inside that vision. George Takei embodied its promise in ways that resonated with millions of people who saw themselves in Sulu for the very first time. Walter Koenig brought earnestness and joy to a franchise that needed both. When people of that stature speak about what the franchise has lost, it deserves more than a polite nod and a press release. The anger that fans are feeling, and that the original cast is clearly feeling, is not nostalgia for a simpler time. It is not resistance to new ideas or new faces or new stories. It is the specific frustration of watching something that once stood for something profound become something that merely performs profundity. There is a difference between a show that wrestles honestly with the question of who we are and who we could become, and a show that simply arranges diverse characters in Star Trek uniforms and calls itself visionary. The original series understood that difference intuitively. The best of modern Trek, Strange New Worlds at its finest, Picard Season 3 in its emotionally resonant conclusion, understands it too. Starfleet Academy, despite the good intentions of its creators, did not convince enough of the audience that it understood the difference. And the numbers reflected that brutally. So what comes next? The honest answer is that nobody knows. Paramount has signaled it remains committed to the Star Trek IP. A new Star Trek film is reportedly in development, which would be the franchise's first theatrical release since Star Trek Beyond a decade ago. 2 seasons of Strange New Worlds still await their premiere dates, giving fans something to hold on to in the near term. But the television future, the part of the franchise where Star Trek has always done its most meaningful work, is a blank page. What the original cast would ask for, if given the floor, is probably simpler than anyone in a studio expects. Stop chasing trends. Stop engineering diversity instead of discovering it through character. Stop conflating political messaging with moral storytelling. Hire writers who love Star Trek the way Roddenberry loved it, as a vehicle for genuine wonder, genuine optimism, and genuine faith in the human capacity for growth. Build characters who are more than their identities. Tell stories that are about something without telling the audience what to think about it. Trust the franchise. Trust the audience. Gene Roddenberry imagined a future where humanity had learned, finally, to delight in its differences. That is a radical, beautiful, and stubbornly hopeful idea. It is an idea worth fighting for. It is an idea that William Shatner, George Takei, Walter Koenig, and every actor who ever put on a Starfleet uniform gave a piece of their lives to. The question Paramount must now answer, with real decisions, not statements, is whether the people who hold Star Trek's future are worthy of the legacy the original cast built. The stars are watching. And so are millions of fans who have waited a long time to see Star Trek become, once again, what it was always meant to be.